what are some of your personal concerns regarding kind of where cannabis cultivation seems to be moving toward in general? Because we all knew that as cannabis laws change, whether it be with hemp or with THC-rich cannabis, that it's going to move towards the industrial, agricultural, kind of traditional model. So given your perspective of trying to care for the land and preserve the quality of the productivity of the land and everything, what are some concerns that you have about those industrial cultivation styles?
That I mean, the biggest concern is that people aren't taking a lot of that into consideration. It's a get rich quick type mentality right now, with the hemp market booming, and so there's a lot of opportunity for people to get in kind of before the market, maybe either the bubble pops or just there's so much more supply that the costs or that the prices drop.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of people rushing in, and I think there's a lot of people farming who don't have the experience farming to take in kind of those factors to think about in the first place. The interesting thing I've noticed with hemp in particular is the black plastic mulch approach. Kind of with the 3 years ago or so, when we were kind of the first year out of our pilot program, you saw a couple of big farms doing that, and then the next year, which was last year, I suppose, a lot of new farms showed up, and it was when I asked new farmers, a lot of them from moving in from out of state or whatever, coming in big firms or ventures, seeing the opportunity, and asked their farmers why they did plastic mulch. There was kind of just an assumption of that's how we grow hemp. That's how we should do it. The plant can't handle a high weed pressure,
Right.
or it's an easier way to do that. There's not, at that point, or even at this point, there's not a lot of agricultural research on the crop. But then, speaking with long-term experienced organic vegetable farmers who've done large acreage of that, whether or not a plant is conducive to a plastic mulch really just depends on the species. There are certain plant species that really, really don't do well with weed pressure.
Right. They're slow growing.
It stunts them totally. They just freak out. They want to be all by themselves. And so, you can use it selectively. I just don't know that hemp, or I don't agree that hemp really responds that way to that pressure. And I've seen that through experience here, with 3 years of hemp and, 8 years of cannabis, where, I think the plant is so vigorously growing, it can outcompete most weeds.
Yeah.
There's also the misconception about, weeds are sucking up all the nutrients that the plants are using, when in fact that's not necessarily true. A lot of weeds actually, use different forms of available nutrient in the soil, which is why they are so pervasive in poor soils in the first place.
Right. That's why they're weedy.
Exactly. Yeah. You probably have a better definition of what that means. But so that's that. And then, to that end, that approach, the other thing is, a lot of these big farms, they have a lot of money at stake. They've put in a lot of money, just new farms, new equipment. Their overhead is so high that there's a fear mentality of not wanting it to fail, which I totally understand.
Yep.
Another reason why I keep my cost as low as possible and accept the gain as it is. Because that was a lesson I learned many, many years ago with cannabis cultivation, back when it was farmed really intensively. We poured tons of money into that crop. And I had some years where the profits weren't there due to
Mm-hmm.
losses in pests management, that kind of thing, or just overall market price was dropping. And so it kind of forced me to shift that mentality to where I went completely back onto this path and started this whole journey that's kind of led me here over the last 6 years of like a kind of a more natural
Mm-hmm.
soil building structure, a lot of no-till
Mm-hmm.
hugelcultures. 3 years ago, I grew my first hemp crop on this land, and I didn't amend the soil at all. I didn't feed the plants any nutrient, anything. It was just 100% native soil and irrigation water. And, the plants did fine. They
Yeah.
grew big and strong and did their thing. So,
Yeah, and I guess some of that too relates to how the cannabis is going to be used at the end as well, because like in medical and recreational cannabis cultivation, if your goal is to sell flower, then you're looking at the plant differently than if the goal is extraction or something else. So, for instance, if you're concerned about having pretty buds, then you're trying to coax plants to swell up and have these, dense masses of inflorescences. Whereas, like a lot of hemp, some of it's sold as flower, but a lot of it's getting extracted. And so while you're still worried about resin production, you're not so concerned necessarily about um, having these pristine, beautiful bud structures. Um, I don't know. Is that something that um, that seems to ring true?
yeah, it does. With new cultivation techniques, with growing cannabis on such a large scale, the it really does kind of shift from. I dislike the term industrial hemp, which
Well,
is
it's
what
confusing too.
it is. But as I've gotten into it over the last few years and gone a little bigger and a little bigger, it does ring true in kind of the mentality of the way you're treating the plant. Coming from back when you had 6 medical plants, and
Mm-hmm.
you had to they were so precious, and you had to really treat them very delicately. And so to where the way things are harvested now and kind of thrown around and just handled much more rough because of the volume of it, you
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do it in a more delicate fashion.
Yeah.
A lot of large scale hemp is mechanically harvested, whether it's like stripped off the stems in the field, or
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing the advent of a lot of new combine headers that are able to thrash hemp
Mm-hmm.
biomass off of the stem. Um, that's it's definitely treated differently, but it's kind of like probably a profit and loss type of
Mm-hmm.
evaluation of you have so much material to process and only so much time or so much money and energy.
Mm-hmm.
There has to be a way to do that efficiently, which is really how all of the industrial agriculture has gone. It's
Yeah.